Good morning from a field. Today we are visiting hill forts again, and we've got two in mind that are located between Perth and Dundee, and they're called Drawn Hill, which is just there behind us. And then we're gonna drive out to another one nearby called the Hill of Doors, and please come along today. So we have to get up there somehow. It's looking pretty steep. There's plenty of sheep around. That way is maybe an easier way to get up. But we're probably just gonna go up the steep way, as we do most of the time actually. You already get a great view over the Firth of Tay. So this could be it. Just this very flat top. So here is some aerial footage of a first hill fort, Drawn Hill. It's 98 times 73 meters in size. And it's very interesting in that it is circular. It almost looks like a perfect circle from the air, which in my eyes is quite unusual because normally hill forts shape themselves according to the hill and they end up being mostly oval. The people who surveyed the fort found that it had 3 concentric stone ramparts, but you can't really see them very well because this area has been heavily worn down by farming, and there also used to be trees growing on top of the hill fort. So now you can barely see just the outline of what is probably the main wall, and there's an annex there as well. But this is probably just as most other hill forts in Scotland, an Iron Age style hill fort. I'm slowly being surrounded by sheep. You get a very good view of Dundee Law from the top here. That one right there is Dundee Law, I'm fairly sure. But you also get a view of the 5 hill forts. So you can see, of course, East and West Lomond. East Lomond is a hill fort. And then you can see Norman's Law as well, I think, which we also have visited before. So both of these hill forts that we're visiting today are part of Perth and Kinross. The other one is probably somewhere in the hills over there. But this is the border to Angus. So Angus is over there. And then we've got Dundee over there. So the fact that the hill fort is facing Dundee and Angus, and you can see all across, makes us think that it's actually part of the Gowrie area with all the other hill forts. But again, it's really hard to say as there's no maps other than Ptolemy's map, which isn't particularly reliable to make a point about which tribe lived where. So you can actually see a little bit of an edge here of where the border of the fort ends. You can barely call it more than a crop mark, but it looks very interesting just how round it actually is.
You can see parts of the wall though.
Oh yes, there's a little bit of wall.
There's not much, but
Okay, it's more than a crop mark, but it's also not very raised from the ground. So if you were just walking around, you would maybe have a hard time finding the hill fort, so to speak, but from up in the air, it's a lot more apparent. So here's a bit of a dip, which is very likely to be the entrance, which is supposedly northwest. And the fact that the entrance is facing Perthshire is another reason why it makes us think that the hill fort is in fact part of the Gowrie ones. Just a little bit further down, and it's so hard to see that there's a fort here. So if we didn't have helicopters flying and people able to use Google Maps, I don't know how you would find all these forts. I think that's mainly how people are able to find things, so see it up from the air, discover crop marks and so on. So now I'm a lot further away from the hill fort, and that's the top up there. It looks a little more defined, but still not overly so. Now, I think, however, if you want to visit the Silford, it's probably maybe worth it for a pleasant little walk, because the area really is pretty beautiful around here. The place that we parked in just has space for 1 or 2 cars. I can add a link with a marker on Google Maps on where exactly we parked if you're really interested. But other than that, that was a nice little hill. There's a tree right next to we parked which has a lot of holes in it, which makes me think of woodpeckers. What do you think of these woodpecker holes? So we have arrived at the next location and we have parked just here at the Halliburton Community Woodland. And the hill fort is part of that. So now we just need to find it. The hill that we're looking for should be somewhere in the midst of those trees. There's probably going to be a clearing there. This path is a lot more public than the other one, so we'll see how many people we'll encounter and whether anybody actually bothered to go up to the hill fort. I think we're gonna go up to the hill fort first and then we're gonna have a look at the loch. It turns out a lot more complicated than we thought, so we came back and we're gonna try up this path right next to the gate because we weren't able to find a path towards the crag, towards the hill fort. Alright, so there is actually a path for the wood here, so maybe we just missed it. So it's probably not that way, but this way. It's a tiny little path going up to the top of the hill, which is hopefully where we want to be. Looks like this is all I have to start and land my drone. Wish me luck. So here we are at the Hill of Doors, which is described as a Bivalot Iron Age fort, and Bivalot refers to a double circuit of defensive earthworks, which is just a fancy way of saying a double wall. On top of the Hill of Doors is said to have stood the Castle of Doors, which is said to have been the residence of Macbeth. Although this was written in the 19th century and more recent surveys in the 70s found no traces of a castle, so we don't know. But the Hill of Doors is just a few hilltops away from Dunsinane, which is part of the same chain of hills, the Sidlaw Hills. And Dunsinane is also considered to have been the place of Macbeth's castle, and it is also the place where he was supposedly defeated in a battle against the Earl of Northumbria in 1054. My nerves are wrecked. I managed to land on the stump. So as you can see, this hill fort is pretty overgrown. So it's very hard to make out any features. And the only reason that we're fairly certain that this is the hill fort is because this is where it's been marked on Canmore, and we've taken the right way up. So if you wanted to come here, I don't know if it's worth it, maybe not, but perhaps winter would be a good time to come and see if you can see a little more when there's not quite as much tall grass around. Now, as far as the tribal territories goes, the hill fort is falling off towards in this direction, which is the Perthshire/Gowrie direction. So this is probably a hill fort that would have just overseen the homeland area of Gowrie, whereas the other hill fort that we've been to earlier is probably a border hill fort. So I've gone a bit off the center and you can see a little bit. And there's a raised edge towards the middle of the fort. But I think my conclusion is to not visit this hill fort in the summer if you can avoid it. I personally think that if I didn't have the drones, I don't know how well a trip would have gone. We wouldn't have been able to see very much. But this is why I brought the drone, so that we would be able to see a little bit more. I hope it was at least a little bit interesting seeing these hill forts. And now we're gonna go and have a look at that loch. It's my favourite strawberry patch. Lots of beautiful strawberries. Look at how many wild strawberries we found. They look so delicious as well. There's the cherry tree in the middle of the city, but I don't really care, just eat the cherries. I think cherry season is officially underway. Cherry tree number 2 in the park. These cherries are a lot bigger and juicier. Maybe it's an escape cherry tree from a garden. Look at this one. House that I grew up in had a cherry tree in the garden, and I would sometimes just climb up to the top and just eat all the cherries. And I've been a big fan of cherries, I think, for all of my life. I even found a sunny spot here where the blueberries are already ripening, so feasting on the berries can begin. Look at this, everything really is starting to come out. The sounds of summer. There's loads of these. So much wood. The path we're walking on is pretty overgrown, so we're having to check for ticks every couple of minutes. And we already had a lot of them. I think we probably had over 15 ticks altogether. And that's the problem of summer, I guess. So do you see these? These are tick larvae, and we picked up a bunch of them because we tried to cut through the wood. That was not a good idea. If anything, we'll come back in the winter to try again without the ticks. I've got some bigger ones as well.
You got some big ones too.
Yeah. What can you say? We were actually defeated by ticks. We are out in Hunting Hillforts once again. Behind us is a hill fort called Castle Hill. I don't think it's this one, it's supposed to be this one here. And it's pretty close to where we are, so all it should take is to walk up this forest there. And hopefully there will be no cows nearby, because recently there's been a lot of hill forts that we had to visit that had a lot of cows around them. Wish us luck. There's a look towards the hill forts. The one we're looking for is just over there. And there in the distance you can see the other place that we're going to today. It's called the Airlie Monument. It's the tower that you see peeking out from the wood. So we've parked a car next to a disused quarry, and we're taking the path through the gate here, and it's just leading along, and I think it's leading up right to the hill fort. Castle Hill, near Meames. Not much is known about this hill fort, but I find that it has a pretty commanding view of Glen Prosen and Glen Clover, which is the way up to the Highlands, and it may have been used to survey who was in fact coming in and out of the Highlands. The craggy top of the hill fort has remains of walls, buildings, and a few circular shapes, but it is very heavily deteriorated as well, and no formal excavations have taken place here. I just find it a very unusual place because you also have the round structure nearby, which is not formally associated with the hill fort, so it could be a much later addition to the landscape. I'm sitting here and downloading some drone footage, and as I'm sitting here I'm looking up at the rock and I'm imagining cows appearing right on the top of the rock, just like in a horror film. I wonder if I've just been traumatized by our bovine experience. So here's the round structure seen from the ground, and it's fairly sizable. There is no indication in the archaeological record that there was a broch here, so I wonder if it was maybe a roundhouse. It's clearly an entrance here, and then you've got the round wall going all the way around. And somebody has built a house here as well. So here we are up on the hill. We've got a little square bump over there, which could be an old building of sorts. We've got a beautiful view towards the Cairngorms in this direction. certainly looks like an artificial edge over there. So then, what could be the verdict? We've got our circular structure down there, and we've got a bit of landscaping up here, so my personal guess would be that the whole downstairs bit is just for people to live in and has not been defensive, but this hilltop has some steep edges, so this could have been used during the more defensive times. And I just found another piece of agate, so the collection is growing. So this is our second destination. This nice forest. So this is the Scott Wilson Memorial. This marble sculpture is dedicated to Captain Scott and Dr. Wilson, two Antarctic explorers who planned their expedition to the South Pole in the nearby Burnside Cottage, which was Wilson's home at the time. And this became known as the Terra Nova Expedition between 1910 and 1913. Scott and Wilson and three teammates made it all the way to the South Pole, and on the way they took many notes and collected plant fossils. But on the way back home, the conditions became very adverse and the temperatures very low. They suffered from frostbite. And after two members passed away, the last three, including Wilson and Scott, ended up succumbing to a blizzard. And the bodies were found later on, and their collections and notes were used for science. Looks like the sun is slowly starting to set. Let's get that evening light look to it. And that also means we are back at our car and our long walk is finished. And the hill fort that we visited today was actually quite cute. So I think Castle Hill will get a recommendation from me because it was fairly easy to get to and there was a straightforward path up. And the Early Monument is just a nice forest walk that you can do right in the same area. Look at the size of these. So here's my beautiful bounty, and always remember to forage responsibly.